What's up, guys? Mike here from Ekim Knives, and today I want to show you the saya for that chef knife. It's finally completed. As you can see, it's like a sheath, but made out of wood. Scabbard, if you will? I don't know. They call it a saya. And this is the first one I've ever made. I'll give you a quick little flyby. So we got the chef knife, which you've seen before. And by the way, that's 5 coats of that true oil, and it gave it a really, really nice shine. So check that out. I really like that true oil stuff. True oil stuff. I'm sorry, I'm excited. It's springtime. I get to wear a t-shirt again. Well, kind of spring. Anyway, so this is made out of poplar wood, and the finish is okay. I hope the finish would be a little better as far as the dyeing of the material. But what are you going to do? It's soft poplar wood. It's made to take it easy on the knife. If I made this out of a cool hardwood like the handle, it might scratch up the knife a little easier, and you know, of course it's going to be a lot more expensive as well. So over here you can see we have the pin that holds it in. And let's check out the clearance, the amount of rattle. Just a tiny bit. So I wanted that. I wanted just a little bit of clearance. See that? And then side to side, there's nothing. Or I guess spine to cutting edge, there's really nothing. As far as rattle, maybe a tiny bit. But I'm pretty happy with this. So I wanted to show this off and show you guys, and I'll take the knife out of it now so you can see. So you just take the pin out, and this is made out of aluminum. I turned it on my milling machine. I wish I had a lathe. And of course the knife with that hand rub finish. Let me wipe it off. It's got a bit of oil on it. Just a tiny little bit of oil. I didn't want to get a ton of oil inside the saya. But there you go. You guys have seen this before. The 8-inch chef with that handle. And that's the finish sheen. I didn't buff it or anything. It's just, that's the way it came off of the true oil. So guys that helped me out with the woodworking tips, since I am no woodworker at all, thank you very much for those tips. They helped out tremendously. And a couple of you wanted to see how thin I ground this. I don't know if that shows you anything, but it's 100 thou thick at the spine, and then at the cutting edge, I mean, it's almost down to a 0 grind. It's very, very thin. I left a tiny bit of meat behind the edge. I haven't sharpened it yet, but it's super thin. This should perform very, very well. So that's about it, guys. Now if you want to stick around and see how I made this, I took pictures of the entire process, and I'm going to put all those pictures in line, and I'm going to narrate it. I would have made a video, but it would have just been way too long. But you get the full experience from the video itself if you want to learn how to make the saya. Just like that. Nice and thin and contoured. You see? Including my screw-ups, everything. Everything it took for me to make this, and total cost to make this, by the way, was about 25 bucks. But a lot of work. So, cheap wood, cheap materials, great product. Alright, guys? So if you're into that kind of thing, stick around. If not, I'll see you on the next video. This is Mike here from Ekim Knives, and I'll see you guys later. Alright, guys, this is how I made the sheath. So here's the picture tutorial. First off, I went to Home Depot, and this was almost entirely done out of a Home Depot. I wanted a soft wood as to not damage the knife or kind of kill the edge on it. So I chose poplar wood, which is fairly cheap and easy to find. As you can see here, the thinnest one I could find was 1/4 inch. It's 1/4 inch thick and 3 inches wide. I think it comes in about 3-foot boards. So I bought a couple of boards and I cut them down to size. As you can see, I got a blank here, and I just used it on the chop saw and cut it down. I hand-picked the wood to try and get the straightest, flattest one I could. I'm no woodworker, so this was a... I guess my OCD was kicking in, but anyway, the first thing you want to do is take that middle board and you want to contour it. You want to trim it down to be a wedge shape, something like the same shape of the knife. You don't want a just big square opening, or the thing's going to flop around in there and just be a mess. So I took the one board and I dyed the edges with Ekim, that steel layout fluid. You could tell I'm a metal worker, not a woodworker here. And I took my scribe and I measured out that center line that you could see here. I measured that out just so it would be about the same thickness as the spine of the knife. As you can see, the indicator is set on 70. So I took 70 thou off each side, so that's 140 out of a 1/4 inch board. That'll leave 110 for the spine. The knife is actually 100 thou thick. So on the other side of the board, I dyed it again and put a center line. So this would be 0. So now all I have to do is take it to the grinder and grind that down. As you can see here, I kind of did it just like I was grinding a knife, which really helped a lot. My experience grinding blades helped a lot with this wood, although the wood was kind of slippery and the belt bit me a few times, but it worked. So here you can see the taper starting to form, but I still have quite a ways to go. So I continue on, and flatness is a big thing here. So I would periodically take it to the granite surface plate with some 80 grit paper on it and make sure it was flat. So here you could see the taper with the other boards in place, and it's still way too thick, so it's back to the grinder for me in this one. Oh, sorry, loud motorcycle going by. To make sure I got it all, I took a pencil and I just drew all over it. This way, when I was grinding, I could see that I got everything. Fast forward a little bit, and this is the taper we have now, which is a much closer to the shape of the actual knife. So at this point, I make sure it's clean on the surface plate, and I'm going to call that good. I didn't want to press my luck with this really soft poplar because I was worried I was going to break it. Okay, so now that we have our wedge, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trace the outline of the blade. As you can see, I have the handle on the wood as well. So where the actual cutting edge starts is maybe 1.5 inches in from the edge of the wood. Give myself a little room. I'm going to end up notching this out later to accommodate the handle. Here you can see on the drawing that it's just a very close trace of the blade, along with an estimate of where I'm going to put the pin that's going to retain this in the saya. Now onto the bandsaw, I cut it out as close as possible, with still leaving myself a tiny bit of room to sand it down and make a nicer finish. So you don't want to go outside the line too much, but I am really close. Take your time with this step. It'll save you a lot of sanding if you do it well. Here we are test fitting it, and it's still a little snug. So you know what, I figured I'd go in there and I'd clean it up a little bit, and I did it with a metal file and some sandpaper just because I wanted to take off a little bit of at a time. And you could see the edges are a little ragged and some burn marks from the saw that was sitting there spinning too long. So we cleaned that all up, and now here's the test fit, and I'm happy with that fit now. It's nice and snug. It's not too tight. It's just enough to hold the blade. So you want to take the other board, the flat board, and put it down on a flat surface. For this, I just used the table of my bandsaw. And I got some waterproof wood glue. Don't cheap out on the wood glue, because this is going to get wet. This is going to get all slimy and nasty. So get good glue. And of course, I clamp it up. The only problem of doing it on this bandsaw table, it was hard to reach the other side to clamp it properly. And this turned out to be a little bit of an issue later on. I thought I had got it all. So now you can see this is just a fancy shot of the handle and the saya in the background. To give you an idea of the taper of the actual blade itself and the taper of that center wedge. Now, because it glued up and I didn't know if it maybe got a little wavy during glue up or something like that, so I went ahead and I hand sanded it again to flatten it. So that wedge got one more shot on the sandpaper on the granite plate. This time I was smart enough to duct tape it down. Here we are testing fit again, and it's fitting really nice. So now to notch out that handle, as you can see, the handle is in the saya. We can't have that. It's not going to fit right. So I mark it out, and I make myself a little square to give me clearance for the handle. So now that I've done that, I take it over to the bandsaw and I cut it out as close as possible. Again, get it as close as possible or you're going to have to do a whole lot of sanding. And because we want to just clean it up and make it nice, I go in there with a metal file and just very gently and square it up and clean it up to give me a nice finish. Here we are testing it now with that notch and everything sitting nice and flat, plenty of clearance for the handle. So to the next step, I mark it out, and this is kind of unnecessary. You could just wing it or do it however you like, but I decided to mark it out to give me an idea of the shape I wanted for the general shape. So this turned out to be a little big, but I purposely left myself some room to sand away and do whatever I wanted to do without having to worry about ever coming close to the blade or weakening that glue joint. Next, I went and got myself a 1/4-inch drill bit, one of those ones that are the self-piloting bits, so it's got that pointy end on it. And this isn't in a drill or anything. I'm just holding it by hand and marking out where I want the pin. So I touch the blade, move it over a couple of thousandths of an inch, and I mark my hole. So that's where I want my pin. That's how I got it a nice tight fit. Because the pin is going to be tapered, I chose to do a 3/16 drill bit first. Now I'm planning on a 1/4-inch pin, but I'm going to taper the pin, and that's what's going to hold it in place. So that first hole is going to be 3/16 of an inch, and it's not going to change. Here it is after I cut out that rough shape with the 3/16 hole in it, and you can see there's plenty of meat around here for me to shape and do whatever I want to it. And of course, one more test fit. In this shot, I'm not squeezing it or anything. It's just the friction of the sheath, the saya there, is holding the knife in place. So just a tiny little tap and it's going to come out. But that's the kind of retention I wanted. Not too tight as to damage it, and not too loose where it's rattling around in there. And then we take the other board and we glue it up. So just be careful with the wood glue that you don't get it in the channel, because there is no way to clean that out afterwards. So now while we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to work on the pins. And for this I decided to use oak dowels. Again, it's what I could find at Home Depot. The problem with the oak is it has a lot of voids in it, and it's just, I did not like it at all. So I used it, I figured I'd try it anyway, and I went and I squared up the ends. So we have a 1/4-inch oak dowel, and I believe this is a 1/2 inch or a 5/8. So I square up the ends, and now I'm going to mark the bigger one for the center, because I'm going to take the 1/4-inch dowel and kind of jam it in there and glue it in place. This way I can make a nice decorative handle for it. So as you can see, they advertised at whatever, 1/2 inch, and it's nowhere close. I believe it, no, this one was 5/8. So either way, I take the measurement of the diameter, divide that by 2. You see I marked the end with Sharpie so I could see a little better. And that's how I found my center point. The 1/4-inch dowel was way too flimsy, so I decided to use a piece of brass, and you can see I have this decorative pin that I was going to use. Seemed like it was going to work in theory, and now all I have to do is press that pin in and turn it to make that decorative handle. So I mounted the whole mess in my drill press, and I figured I'd just go in there with a file, maybe some chisels, and kind of make it like a makeshift lathe. So I start filing away, and while it was spinning, it looked really good. It looked like it was going to work, but it didn't. I just was not happy with it. The joints kept separating, and as soon as I'd stopped the drill press, you could see the unevenness. So I said, you know what, let me use something I know works. So I decided to go with some carbon fiber. Ideally, I would have used a 3/4 inch thick piece of carbon fiber, but I just don't have any I just don't have any of that in stock at the shop. So I do have 1/4 inch, so I took 3 pieces and I drilled them out, as you can see here. And now I have 3 pieces with a 1/4 inch hole in the middle. So I took them and I pressed the pin in, and then went over to the grinder and got the general round shape I was hoping for. Glue it all together with some epoxy and let it sit overnight. You can see the nice big heavy aluminum plate holding it down. Once the glue had dried, I chucked it up in my drill to round it out even more, which turned out to not work as well as I'd hoped. So I said, you know what, let me just go and put it right on the mill and take human error out of it. So here we are, mounted up in the mill with a wood turning chisel in the vise, and it was working. It really was. It was round, it was true, and now all I have to do is add some decorative maybe decorative grooves to it. And I started pushing a little too much and they separated. So I said, you know what, here's my pile of fails for the pin. I'm going to go back to Home Depot and I'm going to get a solid piece. Ideally I wanted brass, but they didn't have any brass and I didn't feel like ordering anything. So I found this 1/2 inch aluminum round bar there. I'm sure it's crappy quality because it's Home Depot, but I cut off a piece anyway and I figured let's give it a go. As you can see here, I got the 1/2 inch round bar, the 1/2 inch collet from my mill, and my fly cutter, the Tormach Superfly. Now I don't need to fly cut anything, I just need the insert. So I'm going to take the insert out and use it as a lathe tool. This has a carbide cutter on the end, so it should cut through that aluminum like butter. Again, I'm going to measure the specs, and now I need to turn this down to 1/4 inch. So of course it's not the 1/2 inch they advertise, it's 493, but close enough. It's still, luckily it still fit in my collet. You can see here how I mounted the fly cutter, I guess the fly cutter part, the attachment if you will, in the vise. It's just nice and solid, and I'm going to turn that aluminum in the mill itself. Now I wrote down a quick calculation here of how I'm going to get down to the 1/4 inch. So I took the diameter, I subtracted my goal, which is the 1/4 inch, and I came out with a 243 cut. So I have to take 243 thousandths off. So I just get the cutter to touch, and I zero out my digital readout. Now theoretically all I have to do is make this digital readout read 243 and I should be left with a 1/4 inch. So I start turning and I keep on turning and turning, taking little passes, and it's actually leaving a pretty nice surface finish. I made it as rigid as I possibly could, and then I noticed something. I go to measure it and I've overshot. It's thinner, the diameter is thinner than a 1/4 inch, and I haven't even come close to the 243 that I thought I needed. But then I got to thinking about it, and I'm no lathe guy either, so I realized that I forgot that it cuts at both sides at the same time because you're turning something. So I needed to take that 243 and divide it by 2, which I never did. So I really needed 121.5. So I get another piece and I throw it back in the mill, and we start turning again. This time it worked out better, and I took a wood chisel or whatever this thing is to put some decorative grooves in here and nice layers and everything. And I measured this out with the z-axis digital readout to get them evenly spaced. So each one of these is spaced 125 thousandths of an inch apart. And then I just cut it off with this lathe tool. Once it was out of the milling machine, I took it and I wrapped it with some blue tape, as you can see, sticking out of the end of the drill, so it wouldn't get damaged. And I went over to my Scotch-Brite wheel and I started putting a taper in. Now I wanted to leave the base 1/4 of an inch, but I wanted the end of it to get down to 3/16. So I just kept turning, fitting, turning and fitting, turning and fitting. So after all of that, I decided that the pin was a little too long. It looked a little goofy, and the drill had kind of marred it up a little bit. So I cut off the end, went to some more drilling and turning and polishing and buffing, and this is what I ended up with. As you can see, nice and shiny. It's one piece, so it's not going to break or anything. And I left a little bit of room, so you can see it's not fully pressed in. The wood is so soft that I'm worried that if I bottom it out now, that's it. It's not going to have any more life in it. And this is going to be taken in and out every day because she's going to be using the chef knife for her job. If anything, I could always take a little file and file some wood out to make it a tighter fit, you know, make it go in a little further. But for now, I'm going to leave it like this. Okay, now that the pin debacle is over, I can go on to the next thing and go back to the saya. So here's what it looks like when it's coming off the glue. I glued up that second board, as you can see here. Now everything's nice and sturdy, nice and solid. The glue took very well. So I go ahead and I start cutting it out on the bandsaw, and if you touch the edges, it's no big deal because I left plenty of room on the edges to work with, to sand it down and make it nice. So here you see I have that same 3/16 of an inch drill bit, and I'm going to follow that first hole down into the second. So now the holes are lined up. So that first hole acts as my pilot. And I go straight through. Over here you see I'm fitting it up and making the edges match up on the belt grinder. And I did this all on a 60 grit belt, which was nice because I didn't have to keep changing belts out. I just took my time, did it slow. If you went too fast, it would burn the wood, so you don't want that. So just take your time and go at it. Shoots dust everywhere, so dust collection is almost a must in this case. And here are the results. As you can see, the seams came out pretty nice. On one side it was not as nice as this, but I'll take it. For my first one ever, I'll take it. So now what I want to do is to create that taper is I took a 1/4 inch drill bit and mounted it up in the drill press. And I set my depth stop so it would only go through the first layer. You see it stopped right there, so it will not drill out the second hole. So that's what I do. I drill out the top hole 1/4 inch and the bottom hole is left as 3/16. Now we have to contour. So for contouring, I wanted to make it nice and even. I didn't want to just wing it and eyeball it. So each one of these layers is a 1/4 inch thick, except for that middle wedge. So I took 1/8 of an inch and I scribed a line up and down the sheath, the saya. And once I pressed hard, I was able to take a pencil and fill it in to get a real clear indicator of where I needed to grind to. So this helped out a lot. After that, I set up my DD work rest on an angle like this, and just kind of like doing your 45s when you're grinding a blade, just knock off those corners. So nice and even right down to the line. After that, I went by hand, and I, like contouring a handle on a knife, I rocked it back and forth on the slack portion of the belt. Again, 60 grit, until I got this nice rounded shape. After the 60 grit on the belt, I did the rest of it by hand, and it's softwood, so it went pretty quickly. And I believe I went up to 400 grit. And you can see here is the finished shape and finish. Well, not really the finish, but the finished contour, or, if you will, of the saya itself. So now I've never stained poplar wood before, and I hear it's a nightmare. I did a little bit of research, and it's a very softwood, so it tends to absorb stain unevenly. So I needed to make some test boards, and you can see this helped a little bit, but it still bit me. So the top board, and this is just the scrap, so the top board's going to have shellac as a base. The bottom board is no shellac, and they're both sanded to 220 grit. I separated each one into 4 sections with 3 different oil stains and 1 gel stain to try out. So I put the shellac on the one board and let that dry. And while that was drying, I went and used the same method to apply the stain. Is soak the wood, let it sit for 3 minutes, and wipe it off. This is the one without shellac. As you can see, it's a little darker, and it's got some blotching going on here. Not perfect, but okay. Thinking back, I should have used a bigger test board so I could get a better idea of what it was going to look like over a bigger stretch of wood. Here I'm holding up the knife to the top board is the one with the base layer of shellac, and the bottom board has no shellac. And I put this picture up on Instagram and asked for feedback of which color I should go with, and the consensus was top row, third one from the left. So that's what I decided to do. I used one of my blanks as a stand to hold it while the shellac was drying. And you can see the chef knife here, the chef knife blank is in a vise, and that is just setting up there with the shellac ready to go. After that, I soaked the wood for 3 minutes, like I said, and wiped it off. But here's the problem. It did not take like the board. It should have taken much better than this, but for some reason it came out like crap. So right away I grabbed the mineral spirits and some sandpaper and brought it back to where it was. So I decided, okay, let me try it now without the shellac. Maybe that's what the problem was. It seemed that not enough of the stain had soaked into the wood. So I try it without the shellac, and it was worse. Look how blotchy and horrible this is. As you can see on the back end, it's really, really bad. So once again, we go back to our mineral spirits and sandpaper and sand it down once again. And the final layers, what you see in the start of this video, was a nice base coat of shellac with the stain. Thinking back, I think next time I'm going to use a different wood. I like the fact that the poplar is so soft that it's not going to hurt the knife, but it just does not finish well. Oh, and not to mention the fact that poplar's cheap. This cost me about $10 worth of wood, if that, maybe $5. It's so cheap and easy to find, but I think I'm going to try a different wood for the next one. I just don't like how this finishes. But that's why we do these tests and why we do these trials and everything, to find out what works and what doesn't. I can tell you this, I've put the knife in and out of the saya 100 times, and I'm yet to see a scratch. So that is a very, very welcome addition. I was worried that it was going to scratch up that nice hand rub finish. But that's it for this one, guys. I would have done a video on it, but it was just took me forever to figure this out. So I just took pictures as I went along. Hopefully you found some decent information out of this. And once I get a little more accustomed to this, I plan on doing a full video tutorial on how to do it in real time, to give you kind of a better idea of how I do it and what I do. So that's it for this one, guys. This is Mike from Ekim Knives, and I'll catch you on the next video.